So great to meet everyone. Thank you for attending this panel. Today, as you guys know, we're going to be talking about experiential learning and how it's driving job acquisition and career mobility. My name's Mercedes Bent, and I'm a partner at Lightspeed Venture Partners, which is a venture capital firm based in Silicon Valley. And I invest in edtech, consumer, fintech, LATAM, and a couple of other things. And I am so thrilled to be speaking with you today. I've spent the last 9 years working in the career mobility space, and it's just been so fun to see the trends over the years of how different players are approaching the space with new innovative topics. And you're going to get to hear from 3 that are doing just that today. I do have to call out conflict of interest. I am on Tom's board, and so you'll hear maybe a little bit of repeat from us there. But feel free to also, we're not doing, they're not handing out mics for Q&A, but if you do have a question towards the end, feel free. This is a fairly small room to just kind of walk forward and ask your question. We'll try and leave some time for that as well. So to get us started, we have already introduced me, but let's go down and have each of you introduce yourselves. So we'll start with you, Melissa.
Thanks, Mercedes. Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Jones. I'm the Director of Technical Programs at Shopify. It's a big job within the Office of the CTO, but one of the programs my team runs is called Dev Degree, and it's a 4-year fully funded computer science bachelor's degree for undergraduates.
Brilliant. Hi, everyone. I'm Sophie Ruddock. I'm the General Manager for North America for Multiverse. We are a fast-growing startup focused on building an outstanding alternative to college and corporate training through applied learning apprenticeships, so combining on-the-job training with the skills that employers need to really focus on democratizing access to the best careers. And we launched in the US earlier this year.
I'm Tom. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Forage, and at Forage we work with large companies such as Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, KPMG, Deloitte, those type of multinational brands, to create free open access online training courses for college students to build career skills and confidence, and for companies to pre-skill or invest in the development of young people before the recruitment period. So the best way to think about these courses is they simulate what a specific role in a specific company might look like and give anyone access to be able to experience that before they apply for a job.
And I should clarify that I actually am connected in some way to all 3 of you all. I mean, Tom, I sit on his board at Lightspeed. Multiverse is also a Lightspeed company. And Melissa and I used to work together at General Assembly. So I'm biased on all 3 fronts. But these are going to be great companies that you'll hear from today. So let's start off with, what is experiential learning? I mean, we all kind of say it and have an idea of what we mean by it. But when each of you say it, what are you referring to? Maybe let's start with you, Tom, and come back this way.
On the spot. Well, for me, I'm obviously very biased. When I think about experiential learning, I think about the ability to, particularly in the job process, to try before you buy. So how can you engage in content and experiences which simulate the actual job? And that's obviously what we're focused on at Forage. One of our kind of key theses at Forage is the way that the recruitment has historically worked, which is hire first and train second, doesn't make a ton of sense in the age of software. And in the age of software, you can actually flip that process around and train candidates at scale first and then hire them. And the way we do that training is through open access online experiential training or learning, where students and candidates can road test different careers and navigate fictional but lifelike scenarios before they actually jump into the recruitment process.
And for us, we see experiential learning to be what I call applied learning. So this idea that actually you try something and then you're able to implement it and learn very quickly. And you think about it like if you're learning to ride a bike, you're not going to learn to ride a bike by reading a book. You're going to learn to ride a bike by getting on the bike, trying a little bit. Maybe you've got those training wheels on first, they come off, you fall off, you get back on, and you keep going. And that's very much like what it's like in the real world. And so this traditional idea that you learn through sort of 4-year colleges, and you come out with a degree and suddenly you're prepared for the world of work, just doesn't really stand up anymore. And so that's really where, for me, experiential learning, applied learning, and ultimately apprenticeships, this age-old idea of learning on the job, complemented by sort of robust training that you can implement and really fail fast, is really where it's at.
Yeah, I think at its simplest form, experiential learning is learning by doing, learning while you're doing it, right? Whether that's testing something out or applying something you've learned in a classroom or more formal educational setting to your real life. In addition to early talent and the dev degree program at Shopify, I oversee more traditional learning and development programs for our software engineers and our data scientists. And when I ask folks, why are you not participating more in your professional development? I hear, I don't have time to learn. I'm so busy shipping or writing code. I don't have time to learn. But what folks don't really realize is that they are learning in that process of shipping code and writing code. Maybe they're watching a quick YouTube video to get unstuck on something like that. And to me, that's experiential learning too. It doesn't have to be a formal program. It's that job-embedded, work-integrated learning we all do every day just to get things done.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are all talking about actual application, about trying things, about doing things. I love what you said, Melissa, about it doesn't have to be formal as well. I think one thing that a lot of educators in this room probably know is that you don't have to necessarily have the metacognition of learning to be learning. And we all realize this in different parts of our lives, but I think that's especially important when it comes to this topic of experiential learning. And, we've also seen over the last year with COVID that, there was a huge decrease in the workforce. I mean, and I'm going to be mostly speaking to the US here, but we had, peak unemployment a year and 4 months ago. We had, 25% of the women in the workforce have reduced their hours or dropped out of the workforce. We've just had massive, massive career mobility change. And so I'm curious from your front, because you all interface with employers, how are you seeing employers react to COVID? And what are they doing in terms of experiential learning as they're reacting?
Well, for us as an employer at Shopify, we're one of the biggest tech employers in Canada. And at the time when I was interviewing for my role at Shopify, I live in New York. They were making a big push for me to move to Ontario, right? Like, this is an office-centric culture. You need to come here. You need to be here to do this job. Then the pandemic happened, and suddenly that concern went away. And so for us, it's actually been a really huge opportunity to start to hire talent where they live outside of Ontario and Canada. We have a goal this year of doubling the size of our engineering team and hiring 2,000 engineers. No way could we do that if we were making everybody move to Ottawa or Toronto. So for us, it's become a huge opportunity from a hiring perspective. The challenge is, I think a lot of other tech companies have also seen that opportunity. So competition right now for highly technical roles is huge, which is why we want to invest in that early talent side, right? Folks who are just starting their career.
One of the things that we saw very quickly when COVID hit last March was suddenly this conversation that digital transformation was arriving was no longer the conversation. And in fact, we realized that digital transformation had arrived. Companies suddenly went through these seismic shifts that they thought they had 5 years to go through. And suddenly, in a matter of months, they had to keep up because they'd gone totally remote, and companies realized that they then didn't have the skills in-house to actually be able to adapt and thrive when actually digital transformation was fully there. And so we saw companies faced with two decisions. One was, okay, actually, this is an incredibly tough time. We're going to just have to lay off lots of our staff. And we're just going to have to roll with the punches, see it out, and sort of put our head in the sand. And then the other group of companies was, actually, this presents us this huge opportunity. We're going to have to be sort of thrifty and cunning, but we also want to keep our competitive edge and keep our employees engaged. And that's where we saw a lot of companies starting to roll out large-scale programs, experiential learning, applied learning, apprenticeship programs for existing employees, thinking, how can we ensure that our current staff who might not have the skills that they need to adapt and thrive can come out the other end of this pandemic and add more to our workforce, as well as be sort of incredibly productive employees. And so just to give you an example, our data analytics program, that grew by about 400% just in the last 12 months, because companies were seeing this as an incredible way to solve for their skills challenges, improve productivity, and actually come out the other side of COVID with a competitive edge.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Sophie said there. We saw, think about like how companies used to deal with early talent like pre-COVID. What would happen is, particularly with the large employers that we work with, they would go to a handful of target schools. They would do like in-person events. They would then hold in-person internships. They would do in-person recruitment programs. And, there is, I guess, like somewhat an irony that the rhetoric from corporate America was like, how do we hire more diversely? How do we promote social mobility? Except the way that they were behaving was going to a handful of schools, which was only accessible to a specific cohort of Americans. And what we observed at Forage was that with COVID, they couldn't do that anymore. They couldn't go onto the same 10 or 20 campuses. They couldn't do in-person events. They couldn't do in-person recruitment days. And I think there was certainly some challenges, but one of the really neat things that we saw at Forage was that companies found new ways to like open their doors to like broader and more diverse candidates. And they had to get more cunning, to borrow your words, in terms of how do you upskill, how do you educate, how do you invest in the development of young people and get that career alignment so that, when students are applying for specific jobs, they know what they're walking into. They couldn't do it through like traditional ways, and they use technology to open their doors to, as I said, to broader and more diverse audiences. And what we've seen is that if the hiring data which has been shared by our hiring partners shows that this year's intern classes and entry-level hiring classes are just exponentially more diverse than they've ever been before. And I think for all the challenges that and tragedy that COVID has brought, that is certainly like one thing that I get really excited about, is just seeing if you look at like early talent professionals as the custodian for economic opportunity, they're standing behind that first door of economic opportunity, is like using technology, using experiential learning to really open up their doors to broader and more diverse audiences.
Yeah, and I mean, it's so interesting. We didn't have in the title of this panel anything about digital. Obviously, the whole conference is thinking digital. But, when people hear experiential learning, I think a lot of times your first mind goes to people working together in person. And that is part of what's happening. But a lot of your solutions are also digital experiential solutions, which I think is important to note. Because as you described, the traditional interview process was totally disrupted the last year. And so this try before you buy concept, or previewing, pre-skilling, was really being done by a digital experiential solution. And you mentioned this, Tom, but I wanted to ask a little bit more in terms of how does a digital experiential solution help drive, and unlock new opportunities, more diversity, than a traditional, experience. I'm curious how you guys are seeing that play out with each of your employers.
I can go. So I think there are tons of challenges that come with that. In our case, not being able to, for a sort of 18 to 24-year-old first job without a college degree, not being able to learn from your boss by observing them, not being able to sort of actually have that debrief right after a meeting. All of that is challenging, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But the upside that we've seen, and actually as a business before, we were very much sort of on and offline from an experience. And in the 10 days leading up to sort of the official pandemic beginning, we went completely online. And we saw a couple of very exciting positive consequences. One being, actually, despite, we've been hearing a lot about the digital divide, we actually saw from a learning perspective it to be much more inclusive. Coaches, instructors, managers were able to intervene really early if they saw that someone was struggling to grasp a concept. So actually, you think about traditional software engineering where there's a lot of pair programming. A software engineering coach would be able to actually dive straight into their apprentice's code and be able to problem solve live. Whereas in a traditional classroom setting, actually, you would be going around, you might have to go over someone's shoulder, and you wouldn't be able to actually get into that. And similarly, it's been able to bring a lot more visibility to what our apprentices are doing, to their managers, to their bosses, and in doing so, actually myth busts quite a lot as well. So those common conceptions that actually an apprentice might not be doing work that's truly adding value. When you take out any subjectivity, actually it's all about the facts, and the facts that you can see are the improved productivity, the improved team cohesion, and ultimately an apprentice that's then progressing and adding value in the work in the form of promotions and pay rates. And KPMG saw that within 3 months their apprentices were now billable, and all of those things actually in the non-virtual world, there's much more bias that you see play out, and we're able to sort of combat that pretty head on.
It's interesting that you mentioned the relationship of sort of the instructors and the mentors and the managers and the digital relationship. I've seen such a huge change since we've moved to this pandemic reality of being digital by design, as we call it at Shopify. The way our dev degree program works, students are in the morning, they're taking traditional academic courses at 2 universities in Canada with professors, and then in the afternoon they're working on Shopify development teams with the development manager and their peers. And what was really interesting during this time, I feel like the dev degree students really dove in and were like, okay, this is how we're doing our internship. This is how it's going to work. And I think the digital learning curve was actually higher for the faculty and for the managers who were learning not just how to interact with their dev degree student, but how to run a remote distributed engineering team for the first time. So it was really fascinating to watch the growth, not just for the young people who are in our program, but for the professionals who had never worked this way before.
Yeah, when I think about it, like if you think about like what the value of experiential learning is for young people or for candidates, it's not just about getting like work ready. It's also about like how do you build the confidence to like believe that you belong in certain organizations? How do you shed imposter syndrome? How do you speak the language of the companies that you're working for? And I think that's one thing we've noticed, we're acutely aware of in Forage is that, people, just the way that society is designed, some people have exponentially more exposure to that language just through osmosis, through their personal networks, through the schools that they're attending, compared to, a bunch of other students that don't have that. And that it's like inherently an uneven playing field. And so what experiential learning does, it can be like a great equalizer, particularly if you use technology, you use like digital means to make it accessible to like broad and diverse audiences. I think that's what we've particularly seen at Forage is like the democratization of experiential learning has meant that, as I keep kind of rabbiting on about, that broader and diverse audiences are able to build the confidence, build the self-belief, see genuine pathways into organizations that historically have been quite intimidating and almost like dinosaur-esque. And that's been just like COVID forcing companies to democratize experiential learning has as I keep saying has like resulted in some really, really promising hiring stats.
Yeah, I mean, the democratizing angle of experiential learning is what I love about it. I mean, I always used to say to people, like, if you could just tell me a little bit more about what you were doing or let me work on it for a little bit, I promise you I'm really smart, I can figure it out. But when it's like a new field that you have no idea about, and you just have to show up to an interview, it can be a big, task to overcome. And this is a fairly commercial conference. Let's talk a little bit about dollars, numbers as well, in terms of how do your models actually work? I think a lot of times people can see them from afar and they wonder, okay, where's the money flowing? Who does it flow to from who? Can you just share a little bit about how it works for you guys?
Yeah, I can start. So career misalignment costs employers a lot of money. The stats with our corporate partners is pretty concerning. Like you can see up to 80% attrition of an entry-level hiring class within 3 years of that hiring class starting. And that's despite millions of dollars being invested into attracting, hiring, and onboarding that talent. So, that attrition, like obviously with large professional service firms or corporate companies, there is like some inbuilt attrition like in that model, but certainly no company wants to lose 80% of their talent within 3 years. I almost liken it to, don't want to be the cliche person who always uses sporting analogies, but like an NFL team's draft strategy. Like imagine if an NFL team just was like, I'm not going to focus on the draft at all. I'm just going to try hire superstars from other companies. Like that's just not a sustainable way to build your organization, and bringing aligned early talent into your organization on day one is, the most powerful way to build a great workforce. And so where there is misalignment between the candidate and the employer, and when I say misalignment, that's like someone walking into a job not really knowing what the job entails, not having been able to road test it before and being like within 2-3 years, actually this sucks, I want to go and do something else, like I did when I was an attorney. I watched too much Boston Legal and Suits, and that's not a great proxy to choose a career. It's the company who bears that cost, and so in our model, the company pays to reach that alignment. We are trying to build an even playing field in the recruitment space. So all of our courses and resources are completely free and open access to students. And it's the employers who are paying to post these courses because they're the ones that end up with like the ultimate value, downstream value of getting that career alignment. And we believe that experiential learning is the key to getting that alignment between employers and candidates.
Are they paying per course? Are they paying per student? How does it work?
Yes. So the nuance of our early talent is that typically they have like fixed seasonal budgets. So we use just a normal kind of SaaS subscription model where companies will pay an annual subscription fee to post courses on our website and get access to back-end software that enables them to see like who's enrolled in their courses, where are they studying, who's like particularly high intent. And so, through our courses, if you look at like a KPMG, for example, they've had, I'd say 300,000 to 400,000 students go through their data science course in Forage in the last 18 months alone. But yeah, it's the employer who's paying us a fixed fee to post those courses.
So same here, actually. Our model is entirely free to the individual, and so therefore the costs are borne by the employer. And for us, the crux of our business model is every CEO and board member is tackling two big challenges right now: digital transformation and diversity. And so with our model, we're focused on both democratizing access, and that's really ensuring that we're finding candidates and assessing them for grit rather than grades, but then actually giving them the means to progress and add value in the workplace. And so it's a flat fee for the training, and that's where the bulk of our sort of revenue comes from. And then employers employ the apprentice directly and pay their salary. And then, final thing there, just because everyone goes, oh, really? And that's because this is a pretty unique model and a big departure from a lot of traditional internships, the sort of full-time employment from day one. But that's really where that return on investment comes into it. And so maybe initially people go, oh, really? But actually 70% of the Fortune 500 companies that we work with will take on more apprentices within 6 months. And so they really see the value from a return on investment point of view.
I think both of you have hit on a really important thread. Like as an employer at Shopify with the Dev Degree program, we're investing, I think I'm going to get the number wrong, but I believe it's $160,000 Canadian per student over the course of their 4 years with us. And that covers their full tuition to one of the 2 universities that we partner with, as well as a stipend, a laptop, really taking good care of these young people when they're in the program. And when I was interviewing for my role at Shopify, I was like, $160,000 in 4 years? Like, what company in the world is going to invest that much in early talent? But at the end of the day, it saves us money, right? These Dev Degree students, when they're graduating, they're coming in. We have, our engineering level, job levels. I think a lot of tech companies have that. Our students that come through our traditional internship program who have maybe one term with us generally come in at an L4 level of engineering. Our dev degree students are coming in at an L5 minimum, which saves us a year to 2 years in their professional development. It saves us onboarding costs. And then because the program is so generous in terms of the tuition and the stipend and things like that, we're attracting young people who wouldn't otherwise have access to a computer science degree from a top-tier university. So it's driving our diversity numbers as well. So it's worth it to us. We'll pay that money and we're willing to make the investment. I think one thing that's unique about Shopify is we've chosen to bring that investment in-house. Like I have an in-house team that runs this. We haven't done it through partnerships. We've decided to build rather than buy. But I do think that every company out there is willing to make these types of investments with the right model and with the right partners.
And so, Melissa, I'm really curious because you guys, like you said, did decide to build versus buy or partner. What led you guys to that decision?
Well, I think it's kind of a Shopify thing. We don't have a lot of vendors and a lot of partners. And I think that also at the time when the company was being built, or when the program was being built 6 years ago, we were looking around in Canada and didn't see a partner to come along with us on this journey. And I think now that we've built it, I have a team of 10 people that run Dev Degree. We've proven it over the course of 2 or 3 graduating cohorts. I think we're at the point now where we're ready to say, like, okay, we know this model works within the unique confines of the Shopify culture. What does this model look like delivered through and with partners, maybe with other tech companies or with partners like y'all or other universities? How does it continue to evolve over time? But yeah, I think the decision was really just a combination of sort of Shopify culture, wanting to build things, and then also just not having the opportunity out there in the environment at the time.
Yeah, well, you guys got started a while ago, so
Sure
we'll
did.
forgive you for not partnering with these two. But in terms of you guys, I mean, for Sophie and Tom, when you are looking to work with partners, what are they telling you in terms of their decision or what thought process they're going through? Do they have a plan already like Shopify where they have something going internally, or do they not yet have it and you guys are introducing it to them for the first time? What are their options they're considering?
So in our case, we definitely haven't had companies come to us and say, we want to launch an apprenticeship program, because actually, like, hands up in this room, who has heard of a professional apprenticeship program? Yeah,
Tough crowd,
it is
yeah.
ASU+GSV. So let me tell you, I bet if I asked that question in any other room, I would hear crickets. And that's because actually businesses don't come to us and say, we want to launch an apprenticeship program. They come to us or we talk to them and they say, we are looking to ensure that the jobs of the next 10 years go to a very different group to the jobs of the last 10 years. And that means access, skills, and progression. And from there, that's where we then design and build our apprenticeship programs. I naturally would err on the side of buy rather than build, but the reason for that actually is twofold. One, therefore, we can think about how to sort of build a consistent experience. So whilst the needs of Shopify or the needs of Salesforce or the needs of Google might be different, the skills that someone needs for the future of work will be very consistent. And that's in data analytics or software engineering. The language might change, but the core fundamentals will remain the same. And so I think from sort of a scale and a quality perspective, that becomes very interesting. And then for a business, of course, they want to know how is it going to be personal to them. And that's really where our coaching, which is highly personalized and down to the business and the individual, comes into it. So really focused on how to make the most out of that in the specific business context. And then, of course, every company, if they're launching a program like this, goes, well, what's the lift? And that's always a really big consideration. You hear about an amazing program like Shopify, but Melissa's got a team of 10 people. And then it's training your managers and making sure that the curriculum's great and you're tracking the efficacy. And so a very big sell really is the fact that for businesses, if you're able to sort of partner with an organization like ours, it's the light lift, but with the deep impact. And that's a big driver in terms of why more and more businesses are looking to partner with an organization like Multiverse. It might be wrapped around in a Verizon banner, but with Multiverse really driving that training and the outcomes for them.
Yeah, very similar here. Like, there's nothing in our space. There's nothing stopping a company from creating their own open access online training course, but it's about that easy lift. Also, there's a couple of reasons why companies will decide to buy in our space rather than build. Firstly, is like distribution. So on an ecosystem like Forage, we've already got 2 million students like in our ecosystem doing our courses, but we also, like, universities are our allies, and we work very closely with 300 schools around the world. Our partner universities will actually integrate our courses into their curriculum. So they'll be assigning like the JP Morgan software engineering program, like a professor as homework to their students. So if a company buys from us, they get access to those integrations and distributions from day one. And it's a pretty difficult thing to go off and like do that, obviously do that yourself, but also from a content perspective. Like if you think about the space that we're in, so companies have like quite rigorous, robust like L&D programs, on onboarding programs and whatnot, and companies are very good at deploying content to people post-hire, but they're not very good at deploying content to people pre-hire, and they're two very different types of content, right? Like if you think about a freshman student who doesn't have anyone in their family who's worked in a large company, might be a first-gen college student, and you're trying to deploy content to them to like build skills and confidence to kickstart their career. That's very different to someone who's done like an internship program, spent 1 or 2 years in the workforce. And so what we've found is that where companies, we actually in the early days adopted a model where the company would create all the content themselves, and we were seeing that completion rates were like 2 to 4%, super low. And once we started using our own like pedagogical approach to dealing with our audience and really helping our companies craft that content for the audience, we now see completion rates around 30 to 35% in our courses. So there are a couple of nuances in that pre-hire space when it comes to deploying content, which means that companies will typically decide to buy rather than build. We haven't seen too many companies decide to try and build their own type of courses pre-hire.
Great. And let's see, we have about 8 minutes left. So I want to see if folks in the audience have any questions. Maybe we'll gather a couple, maybe 2, 3, and then we'll go to the panelists. So anybody have questions, thoughts?
Where do the students come from? How do you recruit them and find them and then figure out which ones are good matches for the companies you work with?
Okay, let's gather maybe 1 or 2 more. Sorry, we can't hear you. Yeah, okay. And maybe 1 more question? Yes, in the back?
How do you stitch together the academics and the experience, especially with Shopify? Like, you make this very happy.
Very happy
Working together.
fitting together academics and experience. Okay, so let's start with that question actually. How do you stitch it together, the academics and the experience? And then let's go to who are your students and specifically the question for Forage in terms of your leveling.
I can start talking about the stitching together of the academics and experience. This is something that's been actually quite difficult for Shopify. I mentioned I have a team of 10 people that work on Dev Degree, and I think they're the only people in the company that understand how long it takes to get a partnership with a higher educational institution up and running and going. We just announced that we're going to be partnering with Dominican University in the Bay Area as our first US partner for Dev Degree. Really excited for that. And it's taken us a year to do that because we have to meet with the faculty and look at the curriculum and get everything that we're going to be teaching, all the credits that we're going to be offering for our on-the-job training, as well as the computer science credits they're going to be taking and the liberal arts classes and all of that back at school. All of that has to be accredited by the Board of Governors, by the university. It all has to be approved. But so that's slow and takes a long time, particularly for a tech startup. It's kind of hard to like, well, why does it take 2 years to get a higher ed partnership going? That's how long it takes. But we do it because the value for these young people, not just of the experiential learning, but of that paper, of that bachelor's degree, it's exponential for them. as the first person in my family to attend and graduate from university, I know what a huge difference that paper has meant for me. So it's really important to me that we do that with this program. That might not be meaningful to all the people that we would want to impact with Dev degree, but I know for a lot of young people, it's a huge deal that they're getting that accredited Bachelor's of Science degree.
Any comments from you two on that question, or we can move to who your students are? Okay, great. So, and actually this is for all three of you all. Who are your learners? What's their background, where they come from, and if you had any other specific part? Okay, who are your learners?
So we have two main groups of individuals that we work with. The first group being 18 to 24-year-olds who will not have a four-year college degree. And a big focus there is sort of, as we've talked about, that democratization of access. We will find them from a whole host of different places. There is absolutely no silver bullet to ensuring that we are finding incredible, high potential individuals, but that through the traditional way that we've assessed people for talent, they've just going to have been dinged out because they don't have that piece of paper next to their name. And so that is partnerships with schools, public high schools, community colleges, nonprofit groups, and then everything from Snapchat to Instagram to TikTok. We've had a few viral TikTok campaigns recently. I'm not good enough on it myself to know, but it's been brilliant seeing how that really resonates with individuals. And then the demographic of our apprentices, about half are people of color, 55% are women. I think a third have come from the lowest economically underserved backgrounds. About 10% have been refugees. And so we're really making sure that we are reaching everyone and then showing our employer partners that you do not lower the bar, you just widen the gate. And then the second group being those that are looking to upskill and reskill. And those we'll find either within businesses looking for that sort of internal career mobility, or increasingly, with Citibank, we launched a return to work program for mothers returning to the workplace, just to give you an example of that. And we'll assess them in the same way for potential rather than grades.
Yes, so we're quite similar. So we find our students through university partnerships, two-year community college partnerships. Like anyone can enroll in our program. So anyone here, if they wanted to brush up on their, DCF model valuation skills, you could enroll in our Citibank program. Ours are completely free and open access. But the interesting thing that we're looking at the moment, which kind of goes to your question, is that the train then hire, like the logic behind train then hire doesn't just make sense for college students or people at two-year community colleges. It's like wherever there is like information asymmetry between the candidate and the employer. So we're looking, return to work programs for parents who have been out of the workforce. We've launched programs in the corporate apprenticeship space with companies such as Aon. We've got programs for high school students in underserved communities here in the US with SAP. We're looking at creating programs for military personnel who are transitioning into civilian life. So wherever there is like information asymmetry, we think that between the candidate and the employer, we think that train then hire model actually makes a ton of sense. And our Red Hot Center right now is on that early career space, but that's really just like the first step in a number of steps that we're going to look at pursuing.
Yeah, we've actually had a discussion at Shopify recently as to whether we should rename our department from early talent to emerging talent or promising talent, because we have attracted so many students who are a little bit further along in their journeys, reskilling and mature students and folks returning to work after parental leave. So it really is a rich space that can be open to so many different types of learners.
Yeah, and something I love is that I think we see so much innovation happening at the college level, because it is this big transition point where everyone has to all of a sudden get a job. But so much of the innovation we see is very applicable to all sorts of candidates. And so it's funny in some ways, because when you look at recruiting departments, sometimes the university recruiting department is not the most well-staffed or the most, highly valued within the company, but that's actually where there's, I think, so much innovation going on. So treat your university recruiting teams really well. Or early talent or emerging talent, whatever we're going to start calling them in the future.
Rock stars, that's what we'll call them.
Rock stars talent, I like that one. Well, this has been so great. Thank you all so much for joining me today. And we didn't even get into so many topics. I mean, each of your companies is actually global too. You're in Canada, you're in UK, you're in Australia, Asia. You guys are all over the world. So there's a ton of more to learn about each of these players and each of the people behind them. So I hope you'll talk to them afterward. Give everyone a follow on Twitter. If you guys are big on Twitter, feel free to shout out your Twitter handles.
Mine's spelled weird, so I'll tell you later.
I don't even know what mine is.
This happens better
Make sure you follow Mercedes on Twitter. She's got a great Twitter.
And I think in the app, use the app. I think
Use the
people's
app.
Twitters
Oh, yeah,
are in
that too. That's one benefit of the digital conferences. You just write everything into chat right after. Well, anyway, there's places you can find us, so don't be shy. And thank you all so much for attending.